Hey guys, I had an idea for a future mechanic of the game. I want to see what you
Mm.
guys thought about it. So what
Look,
if they incorporated bridges?
incorporated what?
Bridges.
I'm not really a fan.
You mean inside of
So
the statues?
They already
no, so essentially you get one bridge per season. If it gets destroyed, it's like a 48-hour cooldown to be able to rebuild one, similar to like I don't know, like you're limited in Alliance fortresses, right? So if you want to build it, it's got to be connected to your Alliance territory, but somebody else can destroy it without it being on your territory, similar to a keep.
I feel like
So what you could,
that'll low key be a cheat sheet, low key, because you can
right?
build all right
So
next to the water bridge.
exactly. But if you can only build one, it takes a long time to build,
Hmm.
and they notice you building it, you can start destroying.
Hmm.
You can build and destroy at the same time from opposite ends of the river. So what you could end up having is fight over building a bridge that can last essentially days.
I have a question. Did you get in a fight at a choke and you couldn't get through the choke? And so then the idea of, oh, well, if there was like another option.
Kind of. We had a sub alliance that wanted to try to get over and help, and they were trying to figure out how we could build towers to allow EP points across. And I was like, well, just made an option for a bridge.
Hmm.
But then, like again, like if you know, you got a max build speed and a max destruction speed, right? So if you are destroying faster than they are building, it will then start destroying the bridge. You got
Hmm.
flyers across the river shooting across.
But so yeah, you have to
Have
build the bridge on
infantry
both sides,
flanking.
wouldn't you?
No, so you build the bridge on one side. So you have one building point from whatever alliance is building, and
Well, that's just
then
bad craftsmanship.
Yeah, I was gonna
but
say he's
then
not a civil engineer.
well,
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
I mean, but
But what would be
then
the point
for
of this bridge though? Like what is it going to serve in the sense like from a gameplay standpoint, right? Defensively or connection to the rest of the map
it
or what is it?
it adds just another level of chaos, a whole
But
nother
it's
level
going
of
to
chaos where
Dynamics.
it's going to supplement the
sub
existing
alliance
water bridges that you
a
already
sub
have in the
alliance
game.
can come in, right? So a sub alliance can come in and provide assistance to their main alliance, trying to backdoor that one, creating another distraction, right? Or
Hmm.
or any of these other options. Or whatever utility you want to use for it is, could be massive, but it can create a stalemate fighting on a bridge for a long period of time. And it's not something that builds, quickly. It's not, add 20 builders and then it's done in an hour. It's going to take some time. It's just
I would
another
say
I think
thing.
it's
I think it's
possibly,
interesting. There's a
yeah.
lot of rules that need to be installed with it because it's obviously changing the map, right? The map
yeah.
is laid out in a certain direction for people to from certain zones to get to a central point at a similar time frame. I think the devs could work on the time frame a little bit more, but either way, that bridge would alter that timing, right? So
Mhm.
there would have to be a lot of rules that would go in instilled with that, and even probably development work on the map. Because if there's a bunch of rivers across the entire map, they would have to probably eliminate half of those at least and turn those into mountains so people can't cross them. But I think it's an interesting. It does add chaos. It just would take a lot of work to look at from a development standpoint.
Try to
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah.
I just imagine sitting there like thinking that you're safe, and then next thing you know, somebody's like, they built a bridge, and now you have to send everybody, start building, and try to get everybody closer to that bridge build and start destroying it from a distance. Could make for an interesting time. So that was all. Just wanted to run that by people and see what they thought.
Got any coffee lovers in here?
Yeah. Dude, actually, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I actually think it's something that Age of Empires Mobile should have done, because they actually have a little bit more leeway to do something like that with, how you're able to build walls and other buildable structures like arrow towers, etc. Right? It's almost kind of like COD is taking some things from there, regardless if they are or not. But I think being able to have something, because I mean, if you think about the evolution of buildable structures, that's kind of one of the next steps, right? It's being able to, pack dirt and build another ramp, right? It's gathering wood from the trees and being able to build another bridge at a river. Maybe building a tunnel through a mountain, right? Maybe not that, but again, you get the gist. But yeah, I think it's actually a really good idea. I think it would add another dynamic. I don't know if I'm necessarily, as much as it's creating chaos, as much as it's really just creating another battlefront, right? You're creating another lane to fight through, whether that's attacking or defending. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it could work for you or it could work against you. I think being able to attack it, whether you're building or destroying it on both sides, I think that actually adds another layer of gameplay where you would probably see, either if the river's thin enough, right? Maybe you can, run like blink calves or another way to kind of get across, or maybe you're running more flyers, right? So it's kind of like a different element of gameplay that allows for other unit types to get involved, right? Therefore diversifying what you see on the map. I think it's a good idea, but it would have to be hashed out. Like, you'd really have to have the logic down on it. Like, for example, if you're going to cross a river, right, you can't cross into other zones. It can only be within that given zone. Maybe you could,
right. Same
maybe you could
reason
cross
for-
between any river or any ramp within a zone, or maybe if they have a fixed width that you could only build it over or up or down, right? I think there's things like that you can consider. But yeah, I mean, do I think that would be something cool to test, even if they just tested it for a season, right, at a later stage? 100%. Because I think that would even do something that, once again, no other kingdom builder has really done at this point. So, like, that to me is very interesting.
I think an interesting way that they could do that is, that as the maps have progressed, they've destroyed bridges. Is just use those destroyed bridges as local points that you can build. So you can't build across the entire map, but they open up, I don't know, 10 to 20 spots across the map that you can build this extra bridge. I think that'd be an interesting kind of mediation point, where it's not opening up the whole field and making things.
Oh, you mean so like
chaotic.
if there are fixed points, like if there's fixed bridges that
Yeah.
are like semi-destroyed, and you have to go and build them, kind of like when you're going through like the tutorial and you have to rebuild like a broken building or something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that could be cool too.
Or like in Roots of War, where some of the gates are like, they don't open for the first 20 minutes. You could do it where, like, in the final zone, 3 days in, one of these bridge points becomes accessible to build a bridge at, and so it's like a time stagger. If you get locked out of the first choke, maybe another option opens up or something. That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good point, because right now, as we saw against TFS versus EIS plus DXS, right? Some of the God choke was insurmountable again. So I think keeping a time gated option or alternatives to open up open field war locations, which is otherwise not possible, that'll be great. Otherwise, it's one team or one alliance that, even if they are really big, they're going to be stuck behind a choke, and some chokes are just topographically not possible to go through, right? Even if you have an advantage in terms of the alliance size. So creating options like this, I think I see the utility of the bridge now. So you have your natural bridges, and you are very innovative with your tower building. So you want to position a bridge in another spot. So yeah, that can create chaos. I see the chaos now in the same way. If there's alternatives to chokes, right? That'll be great for the game too, I think. Yeah, but yeah, these things have to be tested out, balance checked, and all the rules. But it doesn't need to be perfect the first time. I feel like you there's some level of testing that happens once you open it up to the general game too. So
Yeah, I just think the game. I think when you have kingdom builders, sometimes people view things as permanent too often, and it's kind of creates this like bad view, bad perspective on, like, people think that things get added into a game and it's like, oh my god, this thing's going to be here forever, right? If it ends up being something that is disfavored or is questionable or is 50-50. And it's such an easy solve for how I view it, which is, all the devs have to do is come out and say, hey, this is feedback that we've been getting and we would love to test this out. So for one season, we're going to test this out and we want to hear your feedback. Like, just think about the wording of that and how much more well received that would be from the community.
Absolutely.
Versus, oh hey, we're just going to add this in, and then you only find out about it once the season starts and people look around and they just happen to see, oh, this is a thing, or someone builds it and they're like, oh, we don't really know what this is until it's built, right? Compared to them giving you kind of a heads up notice and saying, hey, we want to test this out and we just want to see if it's going to stick or not, right? Instead of, because I've heard from people where they've told me that sometimes the devs will just add things in, even if it's things that were not necessarily asked for by the community, and then they will only remove those or change those things if there's enough uproar, if there's enough rebuking of what was added. And to me, it's just such an easier fix in essentially just how you present it and how you communicate that to the community. But I think things like that, where it's, hey, we want to test this or we want to try this, and it's like, hey, we're just going to do it for a season, we'll do it for this group, right? And I don't think people would be mad about that. As long as you're giving people heads up notice and you're saying, hey, we want to test this, and more importantly, then we want to hear feedback from you. And then think about how easy it is, I would imagine, for them to create surveys. They could just create a limited survey for people that are in the most recent season, whether it's 10, 12, 14 of the KvKs or whatever it may be, and they just say, hey, let us know your feedback. How did you like this, or what didn't you like, or would you tweak it? Just think about how much more their R&D, right, like their research and development, would be able to get from something like that versus adding it happenstance or spontaneously, and then people being more likely to be maybe not overwhelmingly excited.
no, absolutely, I agree. The only thing that I would add is, once they make those sort of changes that they want to observe for a season, that they actually keep close observation on all the voice of the customer or the gamer channels like Discord, VIP customer service. The reason is, even during that little time that they are implementing that change, there could be a hack and people might exploit something that they've overlooked to gain an advantage in that season or in the game for that period of time, right? So that's the only thing they've got to watch out for, to make sure that exploitation doesn't happen by alliance members. But yeah, that's a great idea. And it also allows for better innovation from the dev side, right? They can confidently start testing out features, but yes, they have to keep a close eye on how it pans out in real time.
Well, another thing too is I'm not super familiar with how like home server is going to work, but I think your home server is going to be separate from your actual server that you're fighting wars in. Do I have that wrong?
You're right. Yeah, it'll be separate.
So that could be, I know that people have talked about, it's going to be a really good location to be able to test artifacts and pets and everything else. So that could be a good place that they test things like this.
Yeah. Well, the only problem with that is that it's not in a. They could test some things like that, but the challenge is that if you want to test things in a more warlike environment, it's more appropriate where you're going to get a lot more quality data from it and feedback in a KvK, where you have just essentially a higher chance of people fighting. Because typically in a home kingdom, after season 1, once season 2 starts, the likelihood of you fighting or having some kind of civil war, right, in your home kingdom is just, the percentage goes down. It's more likely that you'll have friendly mock fights or battles, and then potentially for the first month or so, or at least until Zone 3 is decided. If Home Kingdoms, so if we're talking like specifically Season 1's going in, if you'd even last past that once Zone 3 is decided. And if you're... and this is one of the interesting things, too, as well, is because really the only way that they could do a home kingdom for KvK's for kingdoms that are past Season 1 is essentially to do a full reset, right? Like it wouldn't, because if they don't do a full reset, then that means that anyone who's migrated out of their home kingdom and has gone somewhere else will go back to a home kingdom that already has territory established, right? From what that initial Season 1 was, which again, who can really remember at that point, unless there's people that are still in that kingdom that would be able to tell you, oh, this was the layout, or they took screenshots, right? So I think it's more likely that, to have it be fair, they're probably going to do a full reset for the home kingdom, and they'll have you choose your starting region. Like that to me makes a lot more sense than if they, than if I was to go back to like 65, right? And I more or less remember kind of how the territory was distributed there and how it was laid out. But if people migrated into 65, or if people that were there, right, that were familiar with it and they migrated out, they may not know. So I think it will be interesting on how they approach that. But my money is more bet on they're going to like reset your home kingdom. So you'll just pick your starting zone again and you'll just rebuild it out.
Do you think it's going to be home kingdom based off of character account or your actual account? So you have a home
what do you mean?
kingdom per. So like you have, you go into character management, right? But then that character management, you might have 20 characters on 20 different servers.
Oh
Then
yeah. It'll most
have
likely be
an
off each
overall-
character.
Okay.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be able to do it off the total account, because that would basically be like what your email is associated with. It would have to be off where your character is in. Now, will they limit it? Right, that's one thing. Like, let's say you have multiple accounts or multiple emails, right, and you have multiple characters that you were able to move to the same kingdom, right? Which again, a number of people were able to do that going into, like, if you're going into Season 2, and you have you put a character in each of the kingdoms, right, that are plus or minus, right, 3 or 4, and you migrated them all in. What will be interesting is if they allow that to stay, or if they say, like, the first character you log into will be the one that's there. Like, those are some of those little nuances that we don't know if they're going to do anything like that, or if they're really even thinking about it to that depth. But yeah, I very much think it's just going to be whatever character you go in, or whichever kingdom that character is in, that's where you're going to end up populating.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think it is interesting because I actually think people really should start preparing now. Like, I think anyone who's not preparing for Home Kingdom and really trying to understand what the implications, because there's a lot that I think the majority of players are not really preparing for at the moment, and especially the kingdoms that are currently in Season 1, they really have the best opportunity to like make sure that things are good, because they're going to be seeing home kingdoms happen the earliest, at least from the state or the path that they're on with being already in a Season 1 compared to those that are Season 2 and beyond. And you're going to have to go back to that, especially if you've migrated. And that's the thing, is that the water is a lot more muddied, right? It's a melting pot essentially for anyone that has migrated 2 or more times at this point, or even 1 or more time, because you don't 100% know everyone that's there. And that's one of the reasons why like Season 1 kingdoms have that advantage, is because they know at the moment everyone that's there. And obviously with the exception of like those that are about to start their Season 2 KvKs. But like if you're a kingdom that's just starting, like if you're around like the 360s, maybe 340s, 350s, and that the May update is going to come and bring home kingdoms, like in my opinion, those kingdoms have a big advantage. Now, whether or not they're going to utilize or take advantage of said advantage, that's an entirely different story. But you really...
How do you think we should prepare for... what do you mean by, we should be preparing... How do you suggest we should prepare for home kingdoms, especially the older servers? I think a lot of us here are from the older servers, so...
Yeah.
How
Well,
do you
I
think
mean,
we
I'm
should
going to do a
prepare?
couple videos on this because I've been getting questions a lot from people that have been asking me like, "Boss, what's a home kingdom and what does that mean for me with work?" Because yeah, again, no, unless you've played another kingdom builder that's had kingdoms like Rock or Infinity Kingdom or Lords of Mobile, if they have home, well, I know they do have home kingdoms, and or anything else that has it, right? Then you'll be familiar. But for a number
Mhm.
of people that are playing COD right now, they've never experienced a home kingdom, especially if this is their first game. So, yeah, I
Right.
mean, I like I said, I think there are a number of ways to prep. I think one of the ways is trying to figure out who is still there and kind of doing that top down from like an alliance level, and then kind of doing it from a player level, and almost starting to try and kind of do some communication and some diplo, you know, as early as you can, so you can have a little bit more of a game plan going in. I mean, basically, because you don't know every single person that's in a home kingdom, so you kind of almost have to approach it to a degree like you're building, like you're in back in season one, right, going into your first kingdom, and you have to try to kind of put yourself back into that mindset on like, okay, what was important for me to do as a player, as an alliance, when I was in season one and the kingdom was building out its foundation. And so I think some of those, and obviously there's a number of things I'll touch on, but I think that is one of the biggest things that alliances should be doing. Alliances and players should be doing now. Probably even a while ago. Like I would even have argued a few months ago. But I mean, there's obviously plenty of time. It's not like home kingdoms are here yet. But this is definitely the time to start doing that prep, because it's really going to help a lot more for those that are doing it sooner than later.
Do you think that older kingdoms with the servers, I guess, are big enough? There's enough population that there will be that much turmoil. For instance, our group migrated to a different server. We picked a server that was basically inactive. We're a top alliance. Home kingdoms isn't really going to be a big problem for us. Um, I think this more attributes to maybe the 150 plus, 170 plus, wherever that cutoff is, where things haven't really migrated as much, or you don't have as much player drop off. I think the early servers, the home kingdom's really not going to be as effective. I come from not playing a different game. This is my first. Call of Dragons is my first one, so I don't have that background, but just being looking into the future, that's kind of what I see is not too much issues moving forward.
Yeah, I mean,
For the,
I
for
think
the,
it's less likely if you have, like, if there's only one, maybe even two alliances that are in your kingdom that you know of, and you're absolutely certain that, those are either the most active or just well, I would probably argue and say active and the strongest, but more so active. Because obviously, if you have less overall alliances that are in the kingdom, you have less decisions. Right? You have less reactions and actions based on what's happening, because at that point, it's really, you can kind of do whatever you want, right, so to speak. Or at least you kind of have first say, if you will, in some regards. But if you're, a kingdom where you have, two, three, or more alliances, right? Maybe even three or more. I think at that point, that's where you really start having to have some of those conversations early. I mean, even if you have two alliances that are roughly the same power, right? Depending on what the relationship is, if you're already familiar with them or not, you may need to start having those kinds of conversations on just how are you going to do things in the kingdom. And on top of that, the other thing you have to consider is that right now, and this is, and I'll probably say this in the video, but I'll say it briefly here, is that even though you may think that it may not be as impactful, your level, like let's say you're the number one alliance, right? Your level of responsibilities and accountability and tasks are pretty minuscule, comparatively, because you have to think about the difference between what it's like to be in a home kingdom and everyone that's in a home kingdom versus you just really being there for your alliance members, right? It's like the difference between you being accountable for 200 people versus 1,000 people. And I can tell you without a doubt that the management team, typically first and foremost them, and you can prioritize this like leader than officers, but that management team, and even some players maybe, like if they're higher powered players, will be getting a lot more messages and be communicated with a lot more from players in the kingdom, because you're, again, and this is I don't want to say it's like the crux, but this is a reaction from players in a kingdom when it comes to who's ever the number one alliance. Right. It's not to say this is something that will almost always be attached with whoever is number one, maybe, and then obviously it kind of falls off to a lesser degree with like number 2, number 3, number 4. But anytime you're the number one alliance, you're always going to get messaged from people in the kingdom that are not a part of your alliance, and they may not even be a part of the number 2 alliance. And it can be anything from people asking you for help for assistance, for RSS, to, hey, can I join? I mean, almost anything under the sun, right? It can be, hey, can you come mediate arguments between these other alliances? And that's one of the things that kind of comes with it, where you have to basically be willing and understand that if you're either going to be seen as like, okay, you care about that, or you don't care, and those are choices you have to make. And if you opt to not care, or to not mediate, or to not provide some level of support in whatever form that may be, those players may leave, or they may stop playing. And so there's like a lot that really goes into it that I think the majority of people just or even just the majority of alliances, like, again, if you haven't experienced that before, which, again, at least for Call of Dragons, no one has yet, because we don't have home kingdoms. But this is very much a real thing that happens. So I think it's a lot more intricate, and I think it's a lot more detailed. Not detailed. It's a lot heavier than I think the majority of people really realize. Now, obviously, if your kingdom is pretty much dead, and it's just you and 200 other people, then yeah, you may not necessarily have to worry about that as much. But there's no way of knowing how many total active players are going to be in a home kingdom for those that are in Season 2 at the moment and beyond. At least until you get back there.
Would the home kingdoms be larger than current server sizes?
You mean as far as like total capacity, or you mean like map design
Yeah,
and
because
shape?
it seems like, for example, we're on server 14. It seems like there's somewhere between 400 and 500 slots, and the number of slots is dependent on how much total influence you have, but you never really get a clear picture of how many open slots there are. And
Yeah.
so I thought home kingdoms may help with some of that.
I mean, in theory, they should, because home kingdoms really should be more of a like grassroots nurturing ground to allow for a community and identity in kingdoms to be established, where the likelihood is that more people will stay than they will leave, right? And then if you're having less people that leave, season to season, you'll get a more accurate gauge on where you stand, because then you can audit activity, right? You can basically have everyone audit total activity, well, soft gaugely audit total activity in the kingdom, and then you can figure out, okay, this is how many total active people we have, this is our total summed up power for the kingdom, pull other data, and then you can look at how many slots are available to you each season, and you can kind of get somewhat of a rough estimate. But during Season 1, I estimate that the cap is probably like around 40,000, give or take. Just because when I go back and I look at the accounts I made, like your account number or your player ID is basically the player count for the amount of people that have that play the game. So and this is corroborated by if you look at the number of downloads versus like if you go and make a new account right now, that number is maybe like a few million less than the total number of downloads. So it makes sense that that's the case. But if I go back and I look at my accounts when I was making them for each kingdom, there was about a 40,000 plus or minus couple thousand here difference, at least back then and shortly after global release. But again, you'd have to look at what that looks like now to see if it's lowered or not. And I say that because the Augerstone chapter, for the first Augerstone chapter into Season 1, isn't really indicative of what the total server capacity is. It'll tell you how many people, like it was at 7,500, then I think they dropped it recently to 6,800, where now it's like 6,800 people once they hit level 4, right? You'll get that reward for the first Augerstone chapter. But what would be better is if they expanded that or added another Augerstone chapter or another prerequisite where they said something like, if 6,000 people hit level 10, right? Then you'd have a little bit more accurate gauge on, okay, well, this is how many people we have 2 weeks in that have hit level 10, right? And Age of Empires actually does this, like the Age of Empires mobile game, and their Augerstone or Monument, I think they call it Monument, they have this, and I think it goes up to like level 20, and which I think is dope. Like, that is something I really wish they had in it, because it just allows you to get a more appropriate gauge on how many true active people do we have here, at least at that time, within the Augerstone timeline, when you're playing throughout your Season 1. But unfortunately, they don't. Maybe it's something I'll eventually suggest, but yeah.
I'd love to know. I mean, we were a big alliance, and we struggled to get 200 people to an inactive server to migrate. I mean, it's ridiculous at some extent. I understand the reasons behind it. Obviously, you don't want to stack, but the struggle to get 200 active people into one server is we had to play games to get it to work.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I heard like all the stories where it was like people that were people were getting their cities shields down and then ported while they were offline, so they'd be in limbo, because people were saying that was misconstruing the kingdom stats. So it was like either removing it from it so you can get more people in. I think others were saying, there was one other that someone told me about too.
Moving our whales around.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Someone said they loaded a bunch of farm accounts into a kingdom, and then they removed them, and they saw that that fluctuated it down from full to crowded, and they were able to get some people in. And then I guess the one you said too, there was a few things people were doing, and I'm sure there's maybe other ways too as well that even I just may not be privy to at the moment, but others would be. It's just I just think the challenge is there's just not enough information out about how the system in its entirety works. I think a really good thing that I'd love for them to do is to give an example of here's a normal kingdom, and then give us an example on, okay, how many slots are available, what's the kingdom power, what's the total amount of active members there, what's the average player power per player, what's the average merits per player, right? Give us a mock-up of saying, this is what embodies a normal kingdom, this is what embodies an active kingdom, a crowded, and a full. Even something like that would be great to know, unless they're just willing to kind of give us, some more details and some more explanations on...
Yeah, I love all your hard work that you did on the first 79. It brings up good information to know.
Oh yeah, and even watching that or going to take a look at the spreadsheet, which I have up on my Discord now, I put it up yesterday, is now you can kind of get a gauge, right? It's a soft gauge, albeit, but you can at least get something of figuring out this is the range for full kingdoms, this is the range for crowded, this is the range for active, and the range for normal. And you can at least see some trends that define that. You can see some trends on what the power is that kind of defines it. Again, softly, because we don't know all the players. Really, one of the best ways to gauge that is to look at, you'd have to add up your top 200 player power in a sum total to probably get at least a more accurate-ish gauge on that front, where you're looking at what that is. Because what I ended up finding out is when they did those kingdom powers for the anniversary video, I asked, and they told me that that's what they did. They basically used the rock formula, but they went beyond 200. And my thought was like, okay, you're going beyond 200, but we can only see 200 people on the board. Like, you'd have to expand that in order for us to, get something appropriate. So is it likely that they're probably just using the rock formula simply, as far as from when you're talking about like some kingdom power? Yeah, I think it's very likely that they're probably just going off the top 300, but we can only see the top 200. So at least until otherwise stated.
So I have another quick question about how like the home server and stuff would work, right? So you'd have your main server, like the season that we're in, right? And then you would have parallel to that your home server where you would still compete, get buffs, and all that other stuff, right? Do they work like hand in hand? Like if I get burned in my home server, which is very likely going to happen, um, does that affect my main server?
Sorry, you're saying if you get burned in your KvK and then you go back to your home kingdom?
No, Mike. So if I get burned in my home kingdom,
Okay.
if I this home server, because it's very likely I'm going to try to get burned there. I've made a lot
Well,
of
in that
that.
case, I'm so sorry for you. I'll pray for you tonight. Go ahead.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah. Is it going to work like, okay, I can farm? Are those resources transferable to my main server? I guess it would be my KvK.
I think his question is, are
Or
they happening simultaneously or are they separate events?
yeah,
Oh.
Right.
Well, so I guess the easiest way to explain that is like, so when you go back to your home kingdom, like let's say your home kingdom 65, and you go there. Now, we don't know if they're going to make it so there's an easy way to transfer between home kingdom and KvK, or if once the KvK starts, you're locked in there, right? Maybe for a period of time, and then you can eventually come back. I mean, I've kind of seen it both ways for different games, so we'll have to see how they go about that. Now, if we're using Rock as a baseline, from my understanding, you can go back and forth between your home kingdom and the KvK kingdom. So anything that happens to you in the home kingdom, it's universal, right? So it carries with you no matter where you go, right? So if you are burning, right, if your castle's on fire, for example, right, and then you port to the KvK map, then your castle will still be burning. And the same thing for resources. Everything is essentially universal.
The way I thought about it was the island that they created where you can port safely into is basically that, but as a home kingdom. So your base would only have one singular
Oh, you mean the truce
location.
zone or the safe zone island?
The truce zone. So you would have one singular location, but your base is only at one spot at one time. So you would go from either your KvK to your home kingdom, and then you would be gone from the KvK, and then you'd have to come back. I don't know what the rules. That was my thought behind it.
So I played. I didn't play Rise of Kingdoms, but for a brief moment, I jumped back into Clash of Clans, and then it was like, hey, here's this other account that you have to build from scratch, and I was like, oh fuck this, I'm out. But is it going to be like that where they're completely separate? Like, I know you don't actually have the answer, so it's just like
Yeah.
hypothetical.
Most likely it's not going to be, though. Like, there's not going to be something where, like, it clones your account or gives you a new one you have to build up, but it's attached to your main. I'll say, at least for Kingdom Builders, I've never seen something like that. I know Clash of Clans is not a Kingdom Builder, but for traditional Kingdom Builders, I've never seen that being done, or at least have
But they
heard
will.
about.
They will be linked.
Well, it's not necessarily that it's linked. It's that it's your account. It's just where you're moving it. You're either in the home kingdom or because usually if you move your account, if you move your character from the home kingdom to the KvK, it doesn't leave an instance of your city in the home kingdom. Like it moves it in its entirety to the KvK.
That's what you were saying by the Truth Island or Fantasy Island. Yeah. Okay. Nope.
Yeah.
I'm on board now.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
So like
not going to move.
If you move to the Truce Island, you have to pull everything back. Like you have to, everything
It's like
everything has to be
researching.
located in your system. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
That makes sense. but you can go there to participate, collect behemoths and stuff like that, which will give you buffs in both. I think they said like a buff
I
will
don't think there's
carry
any
Yeah,
over.
the
behemoths
buffs carry
on the
over. Yeah.
Truth Zone, though. I think it's just RSS and land on the Truth Zone.
There was in their video they were
But
speaking about having the buffs it's you're in Aferin basically. Take the behemoths there. It's like the home kingdom in Rock where you have like the buff from the statues or whatever it's called, and they carry over.
Yeah. Yeah, there will be some things that, as you were saying, that will carry over from the home kingdom to KvK. We're just not going to know everything in its entirety until they come out, and then we see. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be like a Truth Zone that's off to the side of your home kingdom. I think that is probably going to be more KvK specific.
No, I was sorry. I was comparing it to the True Zone, like where you have two basically separate entities within the server. You move your base from one spot, either if you're in fighting or if you want to go to the True Zone, you move your base entirely. I was kind of using that as a comparison. So if you want to go to your home kingdom, you'd move your entire base to the home kingdom.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be it's not that long now, man. We got a month until, well, give or take, depending on when the update comes. But you know, I know they said they're looking to hopefully get some information out as early as they can. So, hopefully. I mean, I have to imagine we'll probably hear something either by the end of the month or beginning of next month that is related to home kingdoms. They're going to give us some more information.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for the info.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, at least as much as I'm either aware of or can speculate based on trends.
Good luck on your base.
That's right.
Yeah.
Good luck on not getting burned.
Yeah. I don't know. You're familiar with Zook?
Zoo?
Zook?
Zook? Is it a player or a lens?
Player.
No.
They were SEX, S3X. Now they're LOA.
What kingdoms are those?
I don't even know what they're in now. I don't know. But it was basically they're all still completely whole and they hate me.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, that's aggressive.
Yeah. Well, personal vengeance runs deep, I guess.
Dang. Yeah. Just like that guy and Timmy earlier.
Yeah, that's why I was saying Shadowblade and Zook need to get into one of your counseling sessions.
Go on one of these counseling sessions. Yeah, man. Yeah, I really wanted to ask that guy. I can't remember his name, but the guy that was talking to Timmy earlier, and because he said something about how like he had just came into the position as R5, and you know felt like I think he said something to the effect of, you know, that he felt there were still things that he could have done better or differently, and I think he said something like he didn't ask for it, if I heard that right. And it's just interesting when you hear stories like that, because you know you think to yourself, at least I some of the first questions I ask is like, okay, well, you know, one, did he go and look for someone else that maybe was interested in being R5, and you know you can kind of push that off, or give it to someone who really wants to do it and you know who's maybe more suited for it in that moment, you know. So like, was there some due diligence there where that was applied? Or two, you know, did he go and research and try to educate himself on how to do the R5 position better, or just winged it, right? And just kind of flew by the seat of his pants, which unfortunately, is maybe okay to do if you're in season 1 and you're just starting out, and you don't really have any expectations. But, when you have an established alliance, you should really view it as, you kind of taking over and like leading a team, or like managing a store. You're not going to manage a store by the seat of your pants. And then it kind of brings it up to point 3 or number 3, which is that, it's rough because there's more likely to be, well, I guess it depends on how you feel about it, but at least for me, I think it's more likely to be, or I should say more often than not, there will usually be players that step up or that are leaders that are just not up to par to be leaders in that moment based on their current level of knowledge and current level of experience when it comes to whether it's starting out and leading, but more so like leading, established alliances where they're not like going through steps to prep themselves before they do so. And, that's a challenge because it often presents, like I'm sure how many of you have been leads or better yet, how many of you have been in alliances, where you were like, what is this lead doing? Like, I either don't get it or they're killing the alliance or they're just not fit to lead or you don't understand why they made a decision. And, in the case where it's, like that's accurate and, they truly did something that, was more of a setback or a net negative more than it was, a positive for the alliance. And I mean, it's such a great discussion and topic. I mean, you can really expand on it pretty far, but it really, I just think it boils down to, one, I just think some people are lazy, which is arguably probably anything you can, ultimately say in life where, it's like how much effort and how much willingness and how much time are they going to put into something that really affects a lot of people's lives, especially when you think about the fact that, a lead is, the center point, main point of contact for, up to 199 people, excluding themselves, right? Give or take a few here and there. In an alliance, and especially if it's an alliance that spends money, it's just I just think the position is a lot more serious, and I just think people should take said position more seriously than some do. Which isn't to say everyone doesn't take it seriously, but I do think that there's a number of people that do not take the position seriously and do not treat it with the level of respect that it deserves, and the accountability that comes along with that for the people that they should be responsible for and be looking at and be looking after.
bossnasti, I have a question for you.
What it do, baby?
So you say that a leader should respect his position and how much control he has over people because some people spend, right? So my question is...
I didn't say control over people, just to be specific.
Okay, well, can you repeat then? I misinterpreted.
Well, I was going to say go ahead with what you're going to say first, and then I'll have a better idea.
Okay. Well, my question is, what do you think of dictatorship versus democratic alliances?
You mean generally, like with how they're made? Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Prime.
What?
Oh no, go ahead. Oh, sorry, were you going to say some stuff? Go ahead.
Just agreeing.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. You mean specifically with how alliances are managed?
Oh, well, I'm speaking for, like, for example, what do you think of an alliance that the R5 tries to be like a control freak and control everyone, like how they play, how they do it, when they show up, when they don't show up, versus, or they make all the decisions by themselves, versus an alliance that for the R5 divides the power that they have with the R4s and with its members and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
One's gonna go farther than the other.
Yeah, every time.
I recommend the R4.
Yeah, so I this is again a great topic, and you could even expand this to like kingdom wide management on, is do you have one person, right, that's there? And keep in mind, it's a little more limited because you just kind of have fewer options in an alliance compared to a kingdom. In a kingdom, you can have anything from one person to 2 people to 3 people, right, that are making decisions. You can have a high council, low council. You can have a general council, right, where you have 1 rep per active alliance or per top alliance. You can have 2 reps, 3 reps. I mean, I've seen, dear Lord, anything, right? You can have something where R4s and R5s vote on everything, and then majority vote will carry. So there's a lot of, well, I don't know if I'd say a lot, but there's a number, I'll just say, of ways that I have seen in my experience of kingdoms that are managed and pros and cons that come along with each. For alliances, it is a little bit more simplistic because you just don't have that many people at the management level, right? You have 1 lead plus 8 R4s. So you can, probably do it in one of those few ways that you mentioned, where it's one person, whether that's probably the R5 in most cases, who's just like, okay, this is like final decision. We'll kind of either final or sole discretion will just kind of be with that person. Maybe there's a few R4s that are factored into that, or maybe it's all the R4s, right? So it's those up to 9. You could say up to 9 people will be factored into the decision. And then, does each person's vote carry, a value of 1? Do some people's votes carry more than a value of 1? Like I've seen some very interesting things. But to keep it simple, for your question in its layman form, is between the 2 options on having one person who's making the decisions versus having everyone that's voting on it, right, where you have your up to 9 or 9 people for the R4s and the R5s. My view, because I've ran 9 projects now across 3 different games, and I've kind of done things a couple ways to try things, and I will, and then along with alliances that I've led back in Rock and a few in IK. My experience for what I've seen, right, also based on research that I've done for the amount of accounts that I have across those 3 games. What I like, and this is again if you can get it to its ideal state, is where you have one person ideally that specifically makes the final decision if and when needed. Not to say that person has it's you don't want it to necessarily be a point where the one person, whether that's the R5 or another, is unwilling to listen or to take anything else in, right? And it's like, oh, there's no point in having a discussion or a conversation. This person's just going to be the one who's going to make the decision. I very much think that, and the reason I say that, and I'm not saying that's the only way that could work. I'm just saying that's the way that I like and prefer if it could be done right. Right, like you would have to have someone in that position that's competent, that has the respect, and that has the belief of the management team and your players, right? To trust that this person is going to make the best decisions for the alliance at the end of the day. Like there has to be a buy-in to that, right? It can't just be. Well, not to say that maybe it can't just be, but it's, it's if you get people to really believe in what you're doing, and you get people to believe in that, oh, hey, I have like this consistent proven track record of like, us, getting kind of positive alliance wins, right, in all different areas, and you have someone there that is competent and is very internally focused and community focused within the alliance. I think that you can really have something special in that regard. The difference is that if you go, and this just kind of comes down just to having, it's like too many chefs in the kitchen kind of a thing, where almost too many times when I see alliances or kingdoms that are ran purely democratically, there's a few big cons to this. One is that things take too long to get done, more often than not. Not to say that people who run like a democratic system in an alliance or a kingdom cannot get things done quickly. It just takes a lot more effort to get things done quickly. More often than not, it usually takes longer than it would if you just had one person making the decision and kind of listening to feedback, etc. Number 2 is that you often will see small groups of internal allies that will form, right? So an example would be, if we're just using the alliance example, I've seen situations multiple times where you'll have 2, 3, 4 officers in that alliance that will get together and say, hey, we're going to vote this way, or, we want this to happen, so we're going to push this change. And it very much can undermine the integrity of the overall decision and best interests of the alliance that needs to be done. And again, you can kind of imagine where that can lead beyond that. But I think those are some of the big hurdles and detriments of running that kind of a system. If it is not if that's not what you want to do, and then on top of that, if it's not just a very well-oiled machine. So yeah, again, my view and vote is kind of more in if you can get this, if you can really get it done right. But the challenge is that if you're going to have someone who's going to be in that position, and you are, and then the con of running someone who's hey, this is just my final decision, or I'm the sole discretionary person for that. You also have to have someone in that position that has kind of a range of knowledge and experience, right? Where they have a good understanding of the game. Doesn't necessarily mean they need to have a master or, kind of a specialist expertise in every single area, but you should at least have a wide range level of knowledge at minimum, an entry level. And, really I would say be very good at relations, interpersonal relationship, relationship building. You should be well-versed in communication. You should be a freaking expert at soft skills, which I think is such an undervalued trait and characteristic of not only just leaderships, but I just think in life as well. The way that we talk to people, and the ability for one person to communicate with another, where where the hope is that no one ever gets offended, no one ever takes anything the wrong way. That is such, to me, an underappreciated and undervalued skill set of leaders that just not everyone has. People can work towards it. Everyone has the opportunity to work towards it, but just not everyone has it at any particular given moment in time, right? But anyway, yeah. Without getting too far off topic, yeah, that's what my vote would go towards. And if you're not able to find someone who is competent, then yeah, I think there's other methods, right? Maybe you going to a kind of more pure democracy-based system within your alliance, where it's hey, everyone kind of gets a vote, and you do it that way. Maybe that's a little bit more up that alley. I think in large part it just depends on what they want to run. But like I said, for me personally, I'm very much of the opinion if you can do it well, and you can have one person, I think it solves so many more things than the potential problems that it creates, versus running something where everyone gets a vote. And that's not, again, it's different than saying everyone gets a say or everyone's going to be heard. We're just specifically talking about where your vote is, or the final kind of decision that is made between those two styles.
Boss, in your interview with Phalanx, you touched on the way we run things, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, we've changed it up slightly this season, so it's gone from the 2 R5s we now put in a third, and then we've also got, which you were talking about, we call it the trigger man, so someone that just has the overarching decision.
Yeah.
If we can't come to a decision, or it takes too long. But in general, when it comes to decision making, it's the online officers, the ones which aren't there. We're not going to wait hours or something.
Yeah.
So if everyone agrees at the time, we should go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and like I said, your system is more resemblant of a kind of 3-party high council, right? For a kingdom is what I would say. But yeah, I mean, I think yeah, if it works for you guys and it makes sense, I've seen that system work, and I've seen that system be successful.
It's the R5 burnout throughout the season. That's what we're trying to get rid of, because season after season we go through R5s and we get to the end and be like, right, I'm either going to quit or I need to have a break. So we've ended up just throwing in extra R5s, and now we just throw it around throughout the entire season.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, boss, you said that right, you'd prefer that it be one person making all the final decisions, and someone who's well versed in many things. He's knowledgeable. He has people skills. He wants to create a community, and so on and so forth. Right? Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that would probably be something in the middle. In the middle, right? Between democracy and dictatorship, it's kind of in the middle, right? Because do you think a dictatorship or a dictator could form a community around him?
So, I mean, I'll say this, right? I think the word dictator is just too loosely used these days, and I think it unfortunately just kind of comes with a passive negative connotation, which can be understandable from a perspective.
It's not in a negative light.
What I'm saying is a number of people will use it in that way, right? Where it'll have that negative attachment to it. I mean, I think something that is probably more, maybe like a monarchy or something like that is probably more. I'd have to exactly see how that system works, but I think someone had mentioned that to me once before. The labeling of it is probably more or less irrelevant. I think the way I explained it is just more of like that to me, right? And keep in mind, you're going to have different people that run things different ways, right? You're not always going to have the same person, or not to say the same person, but if you have one person who's like, okay, is the final decision maker, dependent on how they get to that point, right? Because you still got to kind of get from A to Y before you get to Z. You can have people that just approach that particular position in different ways.
Well, what I mean by a dictator is, I view it a bit differently than a monarchy, because a monarch, he could listen to his people, or he could just do his decision. He just can do whatever he wants. A dictator, I would view someone who doesn't need any feedback from anyone, or doesn't want any feedback from anyone, and he will do his thing. And if you don't abide by his rules, then you're not meant to be with him.
Yeah, gotcha. It's like a my way or the highway kind of a thing.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's what I described. But
that's what I mean. Like,
gotcha.
Somewhere in the middle, right?
Oh yeah. No. Agreed. I mean, now bear in mind there are alliances that operate like that, where it is a my way or the highway thing, and there's some people that are totally fine with that, and there's other people who probably don't want to play in those alliances, and there's, I would imagine there's an alliance out there for everyone. It just depends on what you like and what you're accustomed to or not, or what you're willing to maybe put up with is another way of saying it too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I think my view is somewhere in the middle. I guess it probably is more along the lines of something like a monarchy, or in general, if we're just kind of macro labeling it. But yeah, it's just again, I think like I said, the important thing is like if you're able to do it, right? I think it's what works for you and what is sustainable for you and what makes sense, because once eventually you get to I think once eventually you get to home kingdoms, it's going to be one of those things where any kingdom that has two or more healthy and active alliances, and or if you're looking to grow that as well, you're also going to have to just be more considerate beyond your alliance and how your single group views things. So.
Wait, are you talking about like two not completely affiliated alliances in the same home kingdom?
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by affiliated. Like, I mean, you can have two alliances in the same kingdom that are independent of each other, and you can have two alliances in the same home kingdom that are family, right? They're just
That's what I mean.
branch.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
If I'm not affiliated, I mean like they're like not dependent on one another. Everyone like they're like allies.
Yeah.
Like how you have allies temporary for a season. That's what I mean.
Yeah, you can. And that's the thing is like a number of kingdoms could even have that right now, right? That are in season 2 and beyond, and you just may not know. Because again, you have no way to accurately account for everyone that migrates to your kingdom and everyone that leaves. You also don't know, once you get back to your home kingdom, if other people will try to form other alliances, right? And gravitate people to there and maybe form an independent alliance. So it's one of the things I was saying before. It's like, just accounting for those things and, kind of taking time to start doing those audits now, earlier than later, can like help you start to either figure out what kind of conversations or who you need to conversate with, if needed.
Okay, but I mean, are we talking about like an alliance that would be at least they would have a CF in like a season? Because in like, I think at least in SOT1 and after, like I think it'd be like, sure, you may have like a farm alliance inside your kingdom that you're not aware of because they can't even place a CF, but like usually you don't have like a non-affiliated alliance in your server. Like for me, that's unheard of, and at least SOT1 divisions and after.
Yeah, no. For later KvKs, the amount of player drop off is obviously a lot more at that point, and because of the amount of kind of aggressive movement between kingdoms, it's very likely that that is more of a low percentage chance that you're going to be seeing any kind of independent alliances. But the opportunity for alliances to, or for players to form an independent alliance could very much happen. And that's why I say, that kingdoms right now should really be, especially those that are in later seasons, should really be starting to try and audit people as much as humanly possible, so they can figure out, right, who's everyone in the kingdom, who are all the alliances, who are all the vocal leaders, if you will, like just trying to get a gauge on, hey, are we the only big group here? Are there other big players here? Are there people here that are unaccounted for? Are there people here that maybe, could cause some mayhem and some havoc? If it's any kind of rogue type behavior or not. There's just a number of questions that really alliances need to kind of start asking themselves and start applying some due diligence. But it is more likely for those that are like season 2 plus, where it is going to be less as you continue on. Obviously, it won't be the case for those that are going into seasons after Home Kingdoms come out. But yeah, for at least at the moment, it is less likely that you'll see, established independent alliances in any of like the T1 season kingdoms.
I think even for at least S2 plus and after, I think that what you're suggesting is kind of not really, how can I say, relatable for many alliances, because you have to migrate so often to get rid of your dead weight. That is just, you can't just know like, okay, this server has all the, like, you just need to know every account in the whole game at that point, or at least every account in the entirety of your matchmaking pool, which will increase eventually.
Yeah, so I mean more so for like the kingdoms who want to plant roots, right? If you just want to keep being a group that migrates back, every season, and you're just like normal activity status chasing at that point to get the most amount of slots available, that I'm sure can and still will be a thing for however many. But then you're going to have others that are going to want to plant roots, and they're going to want to establish and find a place that they can go to that has the best opportunity to build something out than kind of just being, a temporary stay here and there. In addition, you also have to consider that if they do eventually add in some kind of king-queen system, and more than that, they eventually add in some kind of accept-deny system, it's going to be a lot harder to do that, right? Which will also lean more into, it'll also incentivize more alliances to try and plant down roots, because it's just going to be more difficult, and you're not necessarily going to want to have your management team potentially organize that every single season. Some I'm sure will, but you'll also see a drop-off in the amount of aggressive movement throughout for a number of however many. Like if you were to say there's 50 or 60 alliances now amongst the T1 groups, as an example, of course, that are moving every season, I have no doubt in my mind that number will drop off once Home Kingdoms come out. And if they do add in an accept deny system for migration, that's going to drop off even more.
Oh yeah, I'm talking pre-Home Kingdoms.
Yeah.
Right now, for now, because after Home Kingdoms, I think everyone's gonna find a place. Maybe they migrate to their first ever server or something to like be nostalgic or something. But I think after one migration after Home Kingdoms, then I think it's gonna be like, yeah, we stay here. and then you try to filter out everyone you don't want in the kingdom, try to filter everyone in that you want in the kingdom. Yeah, I think that's what most alliances will do post home kingdoms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pre-home kingdoms, the best you can do is just spam suggestions. Please increase server cap.
Yeah. I think this is more about wanting to know some of the details would be nice. Just knowing more details would be great. So maybe they will.
Quiet.
I mean, the activity status for servers to me doesn't really make sense for end of season as much as it does for start of season. Like start of season, you want to see, okay, this server is active or this server is not active or so on and so forth. But you can't because everyone's merits, everyone's heroes, everyone's artifacts. Well, not artifacts anymore. So on. Everything gets reset. So the activity of the server goes down substantially. And then at the end of the season, then you have everyone's gained all their merits, everyone has spot, everyone has gained more power, everyone has max heroes, and then the activity is full. So then, okay, the season is already over. What do I need to know my activity, the server activity status for? And then you can't migrate more people in. So it messes you up twice. And then at the start of the season, you also don't know who's the more active kingdom. Because you don't know who's active and who's not. Because everyone's reset. I think it would be nice if it was kind of the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, I just think the challenge with the system right now is that it can be heavily manipulated, and it could also incentivize KvKs to not fight, right? And I bet you there's going to be someone or a group that's going to test this out, and they're just going to go limbo for a whole season, right? And just so they can bring in as much power and as many players as they possibly can. Or you'll see, maybe if it's not that extreme, you may even see alliances and kingdoms that will just stop fighting. Like if it's like 30 days before the end of the season, right? Just to try to manipulate the status to figure out when influence will drop off from all those individuals, and then that factors into the kingdom, so they can then bring the most amount of people in. Again, this isn't something that's being done, as like a meta or by a lot of people, but I do very much think that it is a real thing, because I know a number of alliances that have done this over the past 2 seasons, where at some point they have lowered the amount of activity just to test the influence system. And I very much think that the way that they have the influence system set up right now with all the factors, it very much incentivizes a lower amount of PvP. It basically incentivizes to stop doing PvP at a certain point if you want to try and maximize the amount of people that you can get into your kingdom by end of season when migration opens. But I just don't think that you're really seeing it be exacerbated right now by a lot of people. Which is probably just because people want to fight, in the simplest terms. So
I mean, I think even if it was to be put to the test, I think the results will be kind of scuffed, because if you don't fight for a whole season, then how do you actually measure who's actually active? The best way to find how active someone is to have the hardest season where you're fighting 24/7 every single day. Then you'll figure out very easily who's always trying to fight, who's fighting a bit, and who's just farming.
Yeah.
And that changes every season, so you need to keep testing everyone on who's actually fighting.
Well, the thing is, keep in mind, you only need to do that in order for there to be history established, right? So once you have a history of data that is established per player, right, you don't necessarily need to say that they need to fight throughout the entirety of the season. Like an example is, you could have an alliance, or let's say 2 alliances in that kingdom, that fight, but then a month before the season ends, they stop, right? They audit, they figure out how many people they're going to remove or kind of trimming any potential dead weight. And then they go out and they research other people that have been fighting. They recruit that amount of people to come into their kingdom at the end of the season, but then they have a list beyond that just in case the cap opens up more. So that's a way you could do it, and then you bring those people in, right? And you just kind of repeat steps like that for however many KvKs you need to. Maybe you do it every other KvK in order to always kind of maximize on having the most amount of consistent and kind of true fighters, or just true active / fighters in the kingdom. And then you might have people that may test this out a month and a half out, or maybe they'll test it 2 weeks out. So I don't know if we've seen that level of like extreme testing, but I know that there are some alliances that have done variations of testing like this. And from what they've said, from what I've heard, is that it very much has factored into their activity status from what they've seen. So
That sounds very interesting, actually. But for that, you need a BN in your alliance that has tracked every player since season 1 for 5 seasons straight.
Well, I mean, you don't necessarily need to do it for 5 seasons. You just might only need like 2 seasons worth of data, and that's only if you're just comparing. If you're trying to like establish a baseline on what was our activity level versus what was our activity status at that time, and then you're comparing that against where you are currently, and then you're just kind of going and populating those lists and figuring out how you're going to trim, how you're going to add. It's just. I mean, my point is like those things can be done, and. It's to me, I think it is somewhat of a flaw, or at least a double-edged sword, with some of the factoring components that go into not only an individual's influence, but the individual influences summed up to make your kingdom total influence. Right? Like if you look at the way Rock is to me is so simple. Like it's such an easy way to really understand it. It's like, look, if you're Imperium and you're under 35 mil, you can come in, right? And then you get 1 overcap player a month. If you're not Imperium, right, then you whatever they set the cap at, right? It's just very straightforward. It's like this is the cap. You can come in if you're under this power. If you're over the power, you can't. Like it's just very simple. Even Infinity Kingdom was like that, where you could actually set the cap. And I think in Rock you can set the cap for some seasons if you're not Imperium, but in Infinity Kingdom, if you were the king or queen, you could set the cap. You could say it's 1 million, it's 1.5, it's 2 mil, and if you're under that, you come in. It's very straightforward. Like I look at the way they're doing the migration cap in COD, and I'm like, dude, this is like advanced calculus. Like this is some astrophysics level of dynamic scaling, something just so intense. And it just I don't know how other people feel about it, but like to me, it just very much feels like, dude, you're just doing way too much right now. Like let's just dumb this down, let's simplify it. Let's just make it a lot easier to understand, where you don't have people that need to create algorithm-based spreadsheets to figure out how they're going to approach end of season into their migration and their recruitment phase. It's just, I don't know. To me, that's how it feels.
I think it's just too many factors, too many things that they're considering, and then, yeah, it's just too complicated. If you said, okay, it's just merits and power, then it'd be much easier than hills. What was it? I think it was dead. I think it's artifacts. I think it's heroes. I think it's building tech, troop power. I don't know what else. They might be even accounting for resources gathered. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Maybe it works out. Like maybe a couple seasons from now, we'll look back and we're like, oh no, you know what, that was kind of stupid to say, and no, it really is working, and it just like took people a minute to get accustomed to. But it's just like it doesn't really. To me, the way I kind of view it is like it doesn't like I understand why they're doing it that way. Like they're doing it that way so they can have a truer gauge on Kingdom's fighting capabilities. Like that's the easiest way to really put it. And they want a way to more accurately assess strength on per kingdom, right? Like that, if you look at all the factors, like that much you can kind of figure out and conclude. But at the same time, the alliances and the kingdoms themselves will, filter out and clear out, their own dead weight or people that are truly inactive. And if anyone is, if anyone is gone inactive, they'll just go and zero that player just so they don't have any troops, and all those go to Sev wounds, right? So they'll clear it out on their own. It's just, yeah, I don't know. Again, those are my thoughts on it. It's just
Stupid. You can say the word.
well, I just feel like it's a little too much.
Yeah. Or
Yeah. But I'm sure some people enjoy it, for however many there are.
I mean, if they want to gauge how capable a server is, okay, that sounds cool. But then, why? Because your matchmaking algorithms, or if you're doing it by hand, holy, you're doing something very wrong.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good
Like-
point. I mean they're probably doing it as well so they can try and have better matchmaking that's more appropriate. But it's just, I mean, if that's the case, they're also, they're putting like high-powered kingdoms, mid-powered, and low-powered kingdoms together. So it's like, are they using that to determine, and then it's on the back end, like, okay, we'll pair this, this, and this, or is that really only being used to pair like the top kingdoms, like maybe the top and mid-powered, but mostly the top kingdoms, right? So it's just kind of even there, then we'll just kind of fill in appropriately going down. Like some of those things we just don't know.
I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense because, I mean, I saw your very cool spreadsheet and your video about it. But, for example, you have some of the top kingdoms in the entire game that are matched in the lowest power divisions. To me, that just doesn't make any sense. I think EAS, for example, is what? They're top 5 in the game. They're what? In the lowest power division in SOB2.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, man, don't get me started on matchmaking. Matchmaking is just...
Someone took a dump.
Well, I understand why
well,
they're doing matchmaking the way they are now. I don't think that they'll need to do matchmaking the way they are now once Home Kingdoms are released, and especially if they add in some kind of gating system for migration. I think it will kind of be a moot point. Because really the only real reason why you would pair low kingdoms with mid to high powered kingdoms is so you have fodder, either fodder for those people to go in to stronger kingdoms, or for the people that are in stronger kingdoms to have an out to go to lower kingdoms that are normal activity status. So that way they can just kind of move more freely, or at least have an option to move if they will. But at the same time, I think the quality of PvP is not as high, and it's not as sustainable as it could be consistently across KvKs. Like, the fact is that if you pair 6 mid-powered kingdoms, let's say mid-powered alliances all between like 5 and 7 million, as an example, you are more likely to get more fighting out of that KvK than if you were to pair between 2 million and 12 billion alliances. And if I said million, I meant billion for the 5 to 7. And the same thing on the low end. Like if you pair alliances between 2 and 5, or 2 and 4.5, or 2.5 and 4.5 billion together, and you try and keep those powers a lot closer, you're more likely to have more people go out and fight. Why? Because no one is seeing that there's a huge imbalance. They're seeing, wow, they're actually a lot closer in power. That means that, I may actually have a shot to go out and compete with other players out there on the field, where it's not just me trying to go out there and, throw my water on, a slab of concrete, right? That is, a T5, or, a max T5/T6, if you want to call them that. Or even if it's just a consistent number of players that are significantly or decently stronger than the other side. Like, there are also pros to matchmaking where your priority is to focus more on balance of alliance power. Because the thing is, alliances are going to trim their fat, right? Like, any well oiled or well put together alliance is going to audit those things themselves, right? The system doesn't necessarily need to redundantly do it as well. They could just believe that, like, really, if you think about it, an easier way to do this is just give the alliances and give the kingdoms tools to trim their dead weight. That's all you have to do. You just give them tools to do it themselves, and then they'll do the job for you. You don't need to do the job for them. Let them autonomously do it, and then you pair the kingdoms appropriately, because no successful alliance and no successful kingdom is going to be okay with leaving dead weight or truly inactive players in their alliance, and much less at the top of a leaderboard, right? They're going to trim that themselves. And so, like, to me, I just think that could be a better way to do it. And then by doing that, you can allow to have more balanced matchups where we can see, a KvK with the top 6 alliances going at it, and then 7 through 12 going at it, right? Like, that, I think, would be, and I would argue, more enjoyable. And sure, if you want to fluctuate, because the thing is, as the game's out longer, you're going to eventually have more alliances that are coming up in power. So it's not like you're going to get the same exact matchups, season to season, right? You may see some people the same, which is very similar to what you're getting right now with the recent matchups going into the new SB2 season, right? You're seeing some people, which it's inevitable, right? You're if you have enough KvKs with the same kingdom pool, you're eventually going to see people at some point in time, right, over again. But yeah, anyways, that's my matchmaking rant. So.